founder and CEO of TapSense. We have David Diggs, who's also Vice President of Data for CTIA. We have Rob Coneybeer, who's Managing Director at Shasta Ventures. We have Geoff Hollingworth, who worked for Ericsson, but also heads of all the AT&T foundries. We have Lars Leckie from Winblad, and Rob Trice from Swisscom Partners. So kind of frame up what we're going to talk about tonight, and basically the year review. It's we do this every year. We get a bunch of VCs on the panel. We also get some other folks from the tech industry and the mobile industry, and we talk about like what happened. And so we're going to look at acquisitions. We're going to look at wearables. We're going to look at the kind of what happened in the app world. Also, there's a lot of new mobile platforms. There's about 5 that are out today that are new this year, besides Android and Apple. And then also privacy and the blah 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 agencies.
Perfect title.
So, so we also have our own rendition of "Twas the Night Before" funding, and I will be in iambic pentameter.
That's written by Mario.
Okay. And so, let's start this one. Okay. Okay. 'Twas the night before funding went all through the day. Not a VC was stirring, not even Ron Conway. The term sheets were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that Andreessen and Horowitz would soon be there.
The founders were nestled or snuggled in their beds while visions of engineers danced in their heads. And the devs at their laptops reviewing the stack had just settled their brains for a long night hike.
When out on the lawn, there arose such a clatter I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like sass, tore open the shutters and lit the sash.
The moon on the breast of the new fallen slow gave the luster of midday to the objects below, when to what my wondering eyes should not make up but a miniature Keiretsu and 8 tiny startups.
With a little old investor so lively and gay, I knew in a moment it must be Ron Conway. More rapid than eagles his courses they came, and he twisted, he shouted, and called them by name.
Now Flipboard, now Foursquare, now Twilio and Twitter, on Facebook, on Snapchat, on Kip, on Flickster. To the top of the accelerator, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, exit away all.
Just as the butterfly before a live demo day, the team flew across the sky coming our way. So up to RocketSpace, the founders they flew with the sleigh full of banknotes in Conway too.
and then there was a twinkling. I heard the voices of VentureBeat and the prancing and pawing of each little feet. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney Conway came about.
He was dressed all in swag from head to his foot, and his clothes were all labeled with logos and soot. A bundle of pitches were flung on his back, and he looked like an investor just opening his pack.
His eyes, how they twinkled. His stature was short and merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the hair of his head was white as snow.
The stump of a cigar he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly.
He was chubby and plump like a right-only angel. I laughed when I saw him in spite of my able. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know that I had nothing to dread.
He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and he signed all the term sheets and then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose and giving a nod, off he went with Kevin Rose.
He sprang to his sleigh and gave his team a whistle, and then away they flew like a down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight.
Happy funding to all, and if you drink too much, take an Uber, all right? So next we have Geoff Hollingworth going to talk about his year in review.
I have to confess, I've never followed something like that before in the whole of my life. So I was asked to speak very quickly for 10 minutes about the year in review, and I thought that would be very boring. So what I'm going to let you into is my life and my year in review, and you can relive. So welcome to hell. You can relive my life for the last 12 months very, very quickly. And I'll point out some of the lessons that I think that I'm seeing from some of the things and the interactions. Some of them might seem obvious. Sometimes the obvious things are the most important things to actually see. So let's start. January, Las Vegas. AT&T Developer Summit. My job, I'm based out of Palo Alto. My job is to make AT&T relevant in the future. I work for Ericsson, by the way. And the hope is that that's fantastic. That got so much life. And the hope that we maintain our relevance through that. There's a special prize afterwards, a drink at the bar for the people. 2 out of those 3 people are AT&T. And if you can spot them, there's a special prize for that. So the serious lesson inside this, this is actually a guy who won the hackathon. He won $30,000 for inventing a service that actually measures the brain waves. They're actually cat ears that spin how your brain's going, and they're very freaky actually if you wear them. He wired them up to a new technology called WebRTC that meant that if you received a call and you were actually stressed, you wouldn't take it because it wouldn't be good. And if you were about to make a call when you were stressed, then it asked you, are you sure you want to do this? So the reason that all the telcos are coming down here, and the reason that David and Heather are here, is that if you hadn't noticed, there's a thing called the communications industry, and that's worth about $2.6 trillion globally. Well, that's up for grabs. And there's technology now where, just like photos moved into applications, communications is about to move into applications as well. So get excited about technologies like WebRTC. You see some of the startups, the Twilios and people like that expect the same kind of change inside there. And that's the big question here. February was Barcelona, Mobile World Congress. If anyone's familiar with Telco Land, that's where telco people go and get together to celebrate Telco World. Nothing to do with this, my memory. This is my hotel. The top ring is my hotel room. The hotel didn't have a bar. The second ring is the bar. The bar didn't have a restaurant. The third ring is the restaurant. It was the most powerful example of a working ecosystem I've ever seen in the whole of my life. Lesson from this, the hotel could have done alcohol, they didn't. The bar could have done food, they didn't. And they all benefited, and I spent a lot of time in that bar. So ecosystems, let's keep them honest. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. March was a crap month, so I'm just going to randomly speak about anything, and I'm going to say the web is dead. There was a promise of the web and semantic web and knowledge and all of this stuff available to us, and if you've noticed, the semantic web never really took off. And the most exciting thing were people mining Wikipedia to irrelevance, most boring thing going on. That's because none of that is important anymore. What's actually important is the moment of now, and actually mining now. And what we start to see is the relevancy and companies like Bottlenose and different people. If you don't know the important thing about now, it doesn't matter really what you knew about before. So that's also true if you think that the web and all of this infrastructure is moving into mission critical things inside industry. So actually what starts to happen is that this can cost lives, and we'll see that a little bit later on. Okay, what month are we on now? April. This guy, this is Gordon Bell. Hands up, who knows who Gordon Bell is? Yeah. Gordon Bell kind of invented computing, right? So he's a bit of a legend. We were on stage speaking about the Internet of Things at a Techonomy conference in Palo Alto. Before we went on, I've never met him before in my life, there was a panel for corporate people before it. I turned around and said, what did you think about that? And he said, I thought that was absolute bullshit. And then we went on and he repeated all of this. The important lesson is, work with people who have nothing to lose, because they usually lose the least, to be honest. And he was very transparent and very honest, and it cuts through all of the corporate irrelevance that people will put in the way. May, all things D. Anyone anyone seen Elon Musk speak? Yeah, like listening to an absolute crazy mad person. Speaking about the need to go to Mars, otherwise we die. And his proof is that we will die because the dinosaurs died. So the only way to survive is going into planetary kind of survival. But you're listening to this guy, and he did discuss warp drive and Star Trek, and you listen to a crazy person that makes sense. He said something incredibly powerful about SpaceX. He said that he looked at the rocket industry, and he realized that 0.3% of the cost of a rocket was fuel, and about 2% was raw material. So obviously it's not being put together very cleverly. And that's what he's really gone now with his project to reinvest and reinvent how to make rockets. But look at things differently because it might not make sense. June, when I grew up, Snowdon was a mountain in Wales. Recently that has changed. Brings up a very important point. If we haven't got anyone from the kind of like government services here, they were very upset by this as well, because what it highlighted was the need to trust people. Trust is going to be dramatically expensive in the future. Because if I'm keeping your data and you come to me and you say you changed my data and I say I didn't, the cost of actually validating when I can't validate that is going to be massive. And as this data all moves online and all the systems move online, we have to have integrity of data. So either if you're running a business, focus on integrity of data and being able to prove that, or if you're thinking of actually building a new business, then actually work out ways to actually secure data. So I've spoken to some interesting people in this space. The first thing that they will tell you is that credentials are compromised. They work on the assumption that credentials are compromised because they can get to them. Be aware that 30% of cyber attacks are caused by internal people. So even if you have the best systems, someone has the keys. So what happens after that? So integrity going forward is going to be a massive foundation and opportunity and necessity for anyone doing online business. July, I joined the Fitbit crew. I went online. I started like measuring kind of everything about me, which was a bit depressing. Who's got Fitbits here? All right, keep your hands up. Who has got their replacement Fitbit here? Yeah. So, another trend, and I know Mario's going to speak about this, it's wearables are disposables. Kind of, Fitbit, sorry, not Fitbit, this is Jawbone, sorry. It has a 40% return rate. That's what happens when software people do hardware. Okay? It's really simple. You don't just put a bug fix out and download it, you return in the device. So as we move into the hardware space, really understand what hardware means, because I would not drive over a bridge built by a software guy personally. And I am a software guy, and I wouldn't drive over my bridge. August, this was actually launched at All Things D. This is a thing called Glow. It's launched by a PayPal founder again, Max Levchkin, I think his name is. He turned around and said, I wanted to solve a big problem, not a small problem. So he wants to solve the fertility of mankind, because he describes pregnancy and getting pregnant as being the process today is about as advanced as it being in the 15th century. So solving big problems, analysing, and really this feeds into something we'll get into with the healthcare. Now personally, I would trust my business and future to two guys that look like this. Right? The message really in September is, there's something big happening, right? Understand that we're in the nucleus of this. Understand there's something massively big going on. Because Nokia in the year 2000 was a $245 billion company. That's about the market cap of Apple today. And they were sold for less than Skype, about 7 billion, right? Apple, if I turned around and said, who do you think Apple's going to be here in 10 years' time? Do you have a lot of confidence that that's true? Because that's how Nokia were. So we're going through a massive change, and there are no guarantees, which is why there's companies like ours here. October, first time I took an Uber. I'm a late adopter. Their site is so kind of slick. Wow. I just found myself falling into their site. It's like visiting Cosmopolitan. Completely Uber for me, and there's Airbnb. It's actually the big trend is utilization and it's sharing. So now what actually is enabled, they have no assets other than a complete integrated network at the center of their business, and they orchestrate utilization of everyone else's asset. They're currently doing about 20 million a week, and it's growing. Completely disrupting everything. Reapply the concept of sharing into everything. November, so this is where we get into healthcare land. And what's amazing is the arguments about how it's so much more expensive to look after everybody, but in reality, the way we look after everybody is so stupid today, then if you can start to change that, then it changes everything. It's much easier, it's much cheaper to keep a car running on the road before it has a crash, and that's the same for a heart attack. So we have the technology, we have the opportunities, and it bleeds into the real change that's going on that says society and the legal strictures and social norms are not keeping up with the technology change. That's both a challenge and an opportunity for people. This is a fantastic podcast by, look at Radiolab, it's called Blame. And it's actually about the concept that can you hold somebody responsible for deviant behavior if their brains are seen to be abnormal. Because what is a person if suddenly you've got down to a level where you can actually see that everything is actually just the tissue and the nerve ending. Fantastic podcast. Last one, some things don't change. There's true people, there's always been true people, there's people that believe in things, there's passionate people. Be one of those people, surround yourselves with those people, and that actually will drive to success and purity. And then my last 2014 prediction, what I think we'll see is that we'll have big people acting small, and small people acting big, and the only important equation in all of that is people. Thank you very much.
And at this time, I'll call up all the panelists.
Poor Rob, there are no seats. Where's the dartboard?
Cool. All right. We'll probably have to do some mic sharing. But so I want to first start out the night. It's like, let's start with you, Rob Coneybeer. Introduce yourself and just go down the line.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Coneybeer. I'm founder and managing director of Shasta Ventures. We focus on early stage IT. We're investing out of our third fund. We've been around for about 9 years. Probably the best known consumer companies we're known for right now are Nest Labs and Nextdoor.com and Mint.com.
I'm Rob Trice with Swisscom Ventures, and if you don't know Swisscom, we're the AT&T of Switzerland. We're about the size of the Bay Area. That's where you should think of us. So in relation to other carriers, we can't offer you a Vodafone or a Telefonica type revenue opportunity, but we're known for partnering relatively quickly. In terms of Swisscom, we have 89% of all SMBs in Switzerland have a relationship with us. We're one of the largest iOS penetrations of any country in the world, very high ARPU. And on Swisscom Venture side, we have a €100 million fund. We just kicked off a €10 million seed fund earlier this year.
My name is David Diggs. I'm with CTIA. Is this on? Yes. It's a chronic question. I should have said, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Because CTIA, as at least a few of you seem to know, is the trade association that represents the wireless industry, principally in the U.S., but there's been a lot of as well. My role in this, working with Heather Blanchard, who's around here somewhere, there's Heather, is to reinvigorate what has become an area where I think we have not focused as much as we should have as an industry and as its trade association. So we now have our ambassador to Silicon Valley, and we're as well reaching out to other areas of innovation in the U.S. So that's me, David.
Hi, my name is Ash Kumar. I'm CEO of TapSense. We are one of the largest providers of marketing tools for your mobile apps and websites. We work with some of the largest mobile app brands such as Trulia, Fab, Redfin. And if you are working on a mobile app or a website, we have some team members from TapSense here. Go talk to them. I'm sure there'll be some interesting things you guys will talk about.
Hi, I'm Lars Leckie with Winblad Venture Partners. We're a 25-year-old venture firm. We only do software investing, mostly on the infrastructure B2B side, although we have companies like Omniture, and then more recently Five9, Inside Sales, companies like that, and then a few companies in that run into the mobile space, including Brian Wong's company Keep, which is here in San Francisco.
And I think everyone knows who Geoff is. Who doesn't know who Geoff is? All right. All right. So let's start off with wearables. Is hardware sexy again? That's definitely wrong.
Oh no, yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny to get that question because if you take a look at my wrists, you'll see that I'm actually not wearing any of the hardware right now.
You have bionic implants, probably.
That's right, I have a secret too. No, actually, Mario mentions this because I'm a big believer in hardware. Have been actively investing in hardware-related companies. And the way that I think about hardware, these are companies where you actually build and design things that people pick up, touch, feel, use. Think of maybe a handset as being early hardware. But you start to look at all these wearable devices, Google Glass, you look at the wristbands, the armbands, Fitbit, etc. But the area that's happening that we find very interesting are areas like, you take a look at satellites are actually interesting, robotics is actually interesting. As I mentioned earlier, we're a very early investor in Nest Labs that's building and reinventing prosaic items like the thermostat and the smoke detector. But what's happening, and the reason these are enabled, and why I think they're very exciting, is because you look at things like Bluetooth, low energy, you take a look at Wi-Fi, you take a look at the prevalence of smartphones that are out there today. What's happening is it's not just about the apps in the smartphone, but it's about thinking of those smartphones as remote controls for the real world that you're in. So making a prediction, I'm guessing you're interested in kind of predictions for wearables and all these items going forward. I think that the world is going to be increasingly full of these items like these wristbands that basically become enchanted objects. Basically, software brings them alive. They sense the real world and then they start to act on the real world. And you use your smartphone and that device that close to 2 billion people have around the world today to actually interact with those devices that you see in your ambient environment.
Anybody else who's got?
Slight riff. I would riff on what you're saying in that I think hardware is very interesting because economics are changing. I'm less keen on wearables, simply because I wonder if this is a fad, is overfunded space. The other thing is, though, I wonder if we're going to see a boomerang where actually you see this stuff come back into the device. If you look at the Samsung Galaxy and you look at the sensor APIs that haven't been lit up yet, there's a lot of latent capabilities in those devices. The standalone devices might start to get integrated in by and large. And that's it.
So I'm a software investor, so I'm probably not going to give you the answer you're looking for. I have many of these devices, and I just put a Metro Mile into my car, and, so I've been doing this, a lot of the stuff in the quantified self, so I guess I'm a consumer of these things, but day to day, there are many of these things. I broke my back as an entrepreneur doing a hardware business and having, your 30% returns and inventory and management, and startups are hard. And those are the skill set that a lot of people, you were saying earlier, software engineers don't have. So learning how to do inventory, learning how to manage that, raising more money to deal with that. Just as you start to think down the path of starting a company, think about the sort of the drag of that hardware on your business and the ability to sort of scale to everywhere very quickly, which is sort of the hallmark, especially of when you see adoption of, you put a mobile device out and it can be used around the world in a day. You put a hardware device out and it's a much, much longer, harder battle to get them out. And I'm certainly a believer that the most wearable device I have is my phone, and I'm using it for running, everything these days. So I see it heading in that direction more.
Geoff, you got some?
Yeah, and just building on what I said, actually, it might be incredibly boring, but the point that mobile phones really were the first wearable devices, and it started very vertically integrated. Then there were companies that specialized in supply chain support, logistics, and that might be an opportunity for people here to aggregate, because that is very hard and it's very specialized.
Yeah, so definitely hardware isn't easy, but Silicon Valley was built on that, right? We built big silicon chips. So do you?
Well, Silicon Valley was built on proprietary hardware.
Oh.
So,
All right.
Yeah.
So a little bit of IBM, a little bit of Intel, some of those guys. But also, do you think that it will come back to Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley will reinvent itself in the hardware space?
I'll answer that. I think you're seeing it right now. You're seeing some huge companies start to come along. Nest is at the forefront of this. But when you take a look at where Google is investing actively right now, you look at the robotics companies they picked up, you take a look at the moves they've made with the self-driving car, you take a look at Apple, which is the most valuable company or one of the most valuable companies in the world. It's a hardware company. It makes its money off of hardware. It makes its money off of gross margins from off of hardware. And then people buy new phones and buy new devices because they need it to run the latest software that, you take a look at iOS, it's given away for free, the upgrades. You can see they brought it over to the operating system where they're starting to give away upgrades for free in order to sell more hardware. So what I think is happening is, if you just step back and you look historically at technology started with computers that were used to compute ballistic trajectories so that Russia and the US could shoot ballistic missiles at each other. I mean, that's kind of where it started. And then IBM took that and turned it into the mainframe that big companies got, made payroll, and then medium-sized companies could use it, and then smaller companies could use it, and then consumers could use it. Where I'm headed with this is that you look at the Internet of Things, you basically get to a point where the atomic unit is below the consumer, and it's actually down in all these items that are around us in our lives, and they start to talk to each other. So if you look at the progression of Moore's Law, what's happening is computation is becoming free, and it can be baked into absolutely anything around you. So when you start to build hardware and devices that incorporate this, and you can build them at prices that are akin to buying apps in the App Store, you open up this crazy new ecosystem. And when you look at where the dollars are flowing, and you look at where the most interesting, innovative, entrepreneurial activity is, we all like to, maybe you all don't, but a lot of people take a look at what Elon Musk has done, and the three companies he has, Solar City, Tesla, and SpaceX, they're all effectively hardware companies. And I think it's just the advent of this wave that is starting to, that is going to wash over Silicon Valley and the world, the technology universe.
Do you think that the cost of hardware the high cost of hardware is a myth? Or do you think, because how much was the Fitbit bill of materials? I mean, how much was that? Wasn't that much?
I don't know specifically that answer, but I think you are seeing lean design principles applied to hardware, and you're bringing that cost down. I made a personal investment in an electric skateboard company called Boosted Board. These guys, just a couple smart kids out of Stanford, and they didn't do anything that was they weren't solving cold fusion, but they took some incredible principles about battery management and acceleration and making it a safe product. The design is fantastic. There were just a couple of us that backed them. Then it went on Kickstarter. They had a target of raising $100,000. They raised $500,000. That was enough to get more than enough orders for them to attract Sand Hill Road VC. So and now they're launching their second generation product. But if you look at that, I mean, they've been able to basically not take a lot of money and get to break even. Proof is still in the pudding. They're not on the stores of the shelves of Toys R Us yet. But I mean, you're seeing that ability to get going and get to a break even point much lower and much easier and faster than it was in the past.
Interesting. I know 3D printing was more of a 2012 phenomenon, but how is that impacting the industry right now? 3D printing, making at least prototyping easier. And how have you guys dealt with anything 3D printing?
I'll throw Bloomberg Capital did one that was, I don't know, anyone here wear orthotics for your feet? And so 3D printing, the first place where someone is sort of trying to apply that is to scanning your foot, I think with an iPhone even, and then they can 3D print something that matches your foot. And so that's a totally custom device that can be made on demand. It's probably the first place where someone's explained to me, other than making my own chess set for Christmas or something, that you could see getting utility out of that.
Very cool. All right, let's move on from the wearable space and move into acquisitions this year. So here's some interesting stuff, and I'll note it. So AppMobi is now part of Intel. Pulse is now part of Facebook. Clipboard is now part of Salesforce. Tumblr, part of Yahoo. Sprint is now part of SoftBank. Nokia is now part of Microsoft. MoPub is now part of Twitter. Major acquisitions this year.
MoPub is a MobileMonday alumni company.
Yes, it was. Actually, I don't know if you were on the panel that year.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
What have you guys seen, at least major acquisitions this year, and at least in the fields that you guys are focused on? And what do you guys think with 2014 will have in store? Did I just name all the awesome acquisitions this year? Is it?
So I think there's a ton of other acquisitions that are occurring. I think you're seeing a lot of distressed sales. So for instance, I don't think Nokia wanted to sell. BlackBerry, who the heck knows what's going to happen? There's a lot of turnover happening amongst the big boys, kind of the wireless 1.0 to the wireless 2.0 era. The interesting thing for me is we didn't see the Series B crash like we thought, where we'd have thousands of companies running for the exit doors. But the other thing that I think you have to keep in mind is that on the acquisition side, there's all these guys that are talking about the quick flip. There are only so many companies that a large company can digest. And you just got to keep that in mind. So a lot of folks are just getting into the business thinking that they can just do the quick flip and name the standard cast of characters. But they've got a budget, an acquisition budget, and they've got to be able to integrate all of those different companies into their operations. So I think it's dangerous for a lot of people to assume that model, that gravy train is just going to continue. And I think already we've seen, with 2008, we saw people pull back, and there's still an assumption that, I can build this and then you just sell it to Facebook. I don't think it's that simple.
So I think that part of what you're seeing right now, there's a relatively robust, probably more robust exit market in terms of IPO alternatives than there has been since, .com era type time frame. I mean, it's been building slowly, but it's about as strong as you could expect as an exit market. And for a long time, that means the last 8 years, the exit market has been primarily to large companies, a sort of acquisition model. So I think you're starting to see companies that they have alternatives to that. So you're seeing the prices of some of these big growth companies and stuff that starting to get inflated, started going up towards this sort of IPO alternative pricing. I think that will continue into next year. I think you're going to see there is such a dislocation right now between call it the old mobile and the new mobile, call it the old infrastructure and things like what Swisscom is building, the new infrastructure companies, what AWS is doing. There is such a massive dislocation there that you are seeing people starting to have to do things in a hurry, get move from an old technology set to a new one, and I think that's what's driving, maybe not all the ones you said there, but a lot of the other acquisitions that are happening.
They're particularly talking about the U.S. wireless community. The acquisition of Sprint by SoftBank, I think, is going to be one of the, we'll look back on that and say that was a remarkable inflection point in terms of the way the U.S. wireless market behaves. I think that's going to get a lot of energy, capital, and is going to make that a much more interesting market space than it has been. And when you couple that with sort of the rapid change in leadership that's taken place at T-Mobile, which has sort of been there, but not, they've been voting present on a lot of things. I don't want to speak ill of our member companies, but I think John Ledger, the new CEO, is one of the most disruptive leaders to come along. And he's put together decent back-to-back quarters.
Yeah, so how many people are familiar with SoftBank here in Japan? Experiencers. All right, so their model is completely different. Their model is like Comcast. So you buy, so if you want to watch HBO, so typically the model today we have operators, oh, you can only watch HBO for 20 hours a week. Yeah, if you want more, you got to up it. So that's the current model we have today. SoftBank flipped the model in Japan. It says, oh, you want access to ESPN streaming? Yeah, it's $5 a month, but it's unlimited streaming. All the data you want, you can watch all the games you want, et cetera, and there's no price tag on data. It's all about services. And I think that's going to be probably a major disruption in the US, at least for the service providers, because they're not going to go like, oh my gosh, so like, yes, they're providing unlimited data for all these different services, but of course, they're subscriptions, right? So just think about that. And it's like, think about your cable and satellite services and how could those apply into the telco space. And I think SoftBank has a really good model and business plan around that. Although in Japan, the infrastructure is completely different and they're...
Mark, can I just throw out, Swisscom launched last summer another different model, which is pretty cool. So you can eat whatever you want, all you can eat, but basically it's a level of service difference. So it's like a platinum, gold, silver. So it's kind of like if you want the express lane, you pay extra. But if you're and if you want to make sure that when you're in that soccer stadium, you've got full bars, you pay extra. But if you're okay, just dribbling along in the slow lane, that's fine too. So you pay according to that speed and that reliability, as opposed to per minutes or megabytes or anything like that.
Yeah, so Dave, I mean, this kind of leads up into a lot of stuff that you've been, CTIA been focusing on. Okay, so basically, we built some awesome freeways. We have awesome spectrum. How many people think spectrum's unlimited? Bandwidth is unlimited. Yeah, okay, good.
How many people like GPS? Any problem with that this year, right?
Yeah, and we are growing with data usage day in, day out. Okay, how many people do over 5 gigs a month? How many actually look at their plan to see how much they're doing? Okay, how many people have unlimited data plans? Grandfathered in. Okay. How many people don't have grandfathered in unlimited data plans? Wow. Okay. Wow, I feel sad for you guys. because well, very shortly, a lot of us we're going to be data hogs, and there's only enough. How many people go down the freeway at 8 a.m. on 101? And how crowded is it? Right? Pretty crowded. The economy's good, right? So that's pretty much where we are today. Spectrum-wise, we have already built all the freeways, and there's no more room for freeways right now. At least not yet for the loan administration. So we're quickly going to come up and hit a wall of like, oh damn it! It's like again congestion, drop calls, drop data access, and that's a very near future. That's basically an experience that we've probably seen in the next 5 years. And none of us are very worried about it, right? It's doomsday, etc. But David is working on this problem for us.
You're welcome. One of the issues, one of the fears within...
David, you turn on the microphone.
Closer.
All right, I'm the yellow mic now. You all hear me?
Yeah.
So one of the fears within the wireless community is the carrier community is that there is for a lot of the development community, the network is assumed away. It is as though a desktop environment where you have unlimited power and unlimited bandwidth, for argument's sake, is ported without any thoughtfulness into a mobile environment where neither of those is true. And with app developers, you can kind of tell the story about, well, you don't want a one-star rating because this thing ate my battery or ate my data plan. But generally speaking, that is one of the concerns that we're now working with the developer community, to the extent that you can identify what the developer community is. And trying to figure out, all right, how can we work together on promoting good practices, on being good, be efficient users of that data. And that's a project that we've been very busy with. You mentioned Rob, different tiered plans, and that inevitably is going to bring out howls of net neutrality. And that's something that's working its way through the courts now. Verizon brought a lawsuit. We believe that most of the FCC's rules on that are going to be preserved, but there will be some places where changes are made. And so that's going to be, if you want something to watch for 2014, that ruling will come out and the ensuing
So I can buy my Prius and drive in the high occupancy vehicle lane? Is that
all
gonna
you
be
can
good? Nice. All right. So agreed on the acquisitions. So let's also look at the app space. So, I mean, it's always good to look at, so message me, that's in, right? And we've got message me. Path, that's out, right? Who's used Path? Who checked in on Path today? Okay. Are you guys still hiring? No. Snapchat? Okay, who's on Snapchat? Snapchat saying, whoo, yeah. Tinder, who's on Tinder? Okay, you're. So, okay, so I'm just curious, you guys, what apps?
Probably half the room.
Let me look it right over.
They're just testing it.
Everybody close your eyes and do the vote again.
So in the app space, kind of what have you guys seen? What's cool? What's popping? I know, Ash, you might have some interesting insights on what you're seeing in that ecosystem right now.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have this perspective on what's cool or not, but we see a lot of data being processed, like
Ash, hold it up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. We get a lot of app companies that we work with where we have seen, and coming back to maybe a little bit of time to the acquisition question, there is a lot of movement in the past 2 years that at least TapSense has been around that I have seen personally. I don't know how many of you have bought anything this year on your mobile phone, maybe raise your hand. A lot of people, right? 2 years ago, this number was really, really low. And we work with a lot of e-commerce companies where we used to see less than 5%. So this is, they have an e-commerce business, they have, maybe they are a retailer. The mobile numbers will be really tiny, less than 5% if you're doing something right 2 years ago. This Black Friday, we released a report we saw for some customers, more than 50 to 60% of e-commerce transactions are actually, it's not e-commerce, it's m-commerce. It's happening on phones, it's happening on tablets, and that's really big changes. And I think when you have industries which are moving at that speed within 2 years, naturally you're going to see a lot more acquisitions, consolidations, as mobile is becoming a really big part of anyone's business. So the biggest change that we have seen, at least in the limited context that we have, is a lot more mobile commerce happening, which is very great for the ecosystem because that's real transactions. Users actually, I didn't believe it myself 2 years ago that people will be actually buying a lot on phones, and I'm glad to be proved wrong. Some of the other categories that we see, of course, hyper growth in, which is based on mobile, is messaging. Naturally, as Mario mentioned, Snapchat is big. I don't know, they even...
Messaging is growing, right?
Yeah.
Messaging apps, yeah.
They do like 400 million photos a day, which is much higher than Facebook. There was some chart about that. Clearly, social networking in different forms and contexts is, when married with location and mobile, is growing really, really rapidly.
So I got two thoughts. One is, I make a distinction between payments on mobile and mobile payments. And payments on mobile is where I might have a credit card on file with, let's say, an Amazon, or even an Apple, or iTunes, right? And I just make a purchase on my mobile phone. Versus a mobile payment, which might be NFC or something like that. Is that the differentiator between the winners and losers on the mobile commerce side?
We definitely see that, and I think the more you make payments frictionless, which is if you have a credit card enabled, whatever service you have, whether that's a mobile website or a mobile app, for some customers is pretty phenomenal. We find that when it's related to Black Friday, some of them have seen up to 70–75% of sales happening when people have credit cards stored within the mobile website, within the mobile app. The NFC part, I mean, I would love to get your opinion on, but I still see fairly young. Definitely, I feel there is a lot of opportunity with iBeacons, which was the new thing released from Apple, and fingerprint sensor. If they open up an API maybe a year from now, that could be really phenomenal. I mean, how many of you enjoy waiting for line when shopping in a mall? No one, probably, right? So if you can make it frictionless with physical payments, but I feel like the technology, the end user applications are still not there. Square comes, to my mind, which is, solving it the right way.
Yeah, just on NFC, I'll just hit that because I've had the fortune and misfortune of making a couple investments in that space. And it's been amazing to me that you've had such a the carriers and the device guys fighting over a market. There's a guy named Hans Reiske's from Sequence Software who talks about how they're fighting over a market with $0 million and 0 million devices. And they've been doing this for 8 years. And I think that next year, this is one of my prognostications for 2014, is it's going to be put up or shut up for NFC. Because I think the ISIS guys, they can't continue to spend as much money as they have. And, Sprint guys are rolling out, but I think it's going to be put up or shut up. You've seen some good traction in Europe, but I don't know if it's actually going to come here or not. And also on the app side, the messaging side, it's really interesting that we in the Valley tend to overlook Line. How many people know Line? Which is pretty amazing. This company got to 100 million users, half as fast as Facebook, and they added 50 million users in Q1 of this year. And yet here we are, the mobile guys in Silicon Valley, and 15% of us have heard of this.
Yeah, I mean, last year was WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp was huge. Who's still using WhatsApp?
WeChat.
WeChat. Oh, wow, that was WeChat. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of stuff. And but that to that point of like 50 million in a quarter, and I started to see in the app world. Remember, like in the late 90s, dude, I got 100,000 hits last month. Like, no way, dude. Like, how'd you? And what happened is as there were more users in the mobile ecosystem, I predicted this, that we were going to find apps that basically they spike, because they're going to spike because it's very viral, but then it's about how well they keep up the engagement and keep that. Definitely messaging apps, it's ping pong, right? It's like I send you something, you send me something, you send me something. So engagement's always there. It's just trying to maintain that, right?
But on any one network, I mean, I've got a whole folder on my phone. I mean, I've got a Beluga. Remember Beluga? I mean, because I test all these things, I'm sure you guys too. It's just like a folder I was dragging to go there to die, right? And so I have a MySpace account too. I haven't done it for 5 years, right? I think that's the interesting thing is how do you drive and retain loyalty on these social networks and the messaging apps?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be through acquisition. Basically, it's how you're going to keep on growing, just acquire.
Yeah,
So one
as far as-
observation, sorry.
All I was going to say is, for one observation, for sure, for everybody in this room, there will be 1 or 2 apps that explode like wildfire across the mobile ecosystem this year. We don't even know what they are yet. So you look at, nobody's even mentioned QuizUp, which is the flavor of the month right now. There's Whisper, which is at huge volume right now, and nobody's heard of. Same thing you were talking about, Line. Because when you step back and you look at what's happening in the mobile ecosystem right now, it's flatter than it's ever been before. A few years ago, it would have still been controversial to say Nokia is going to go back to building rubber boots as their primary business. And people wouldn't have thought that BlackBerry would be quite where it is right now. So you have two platforms that serve basically 2 billion people around the world. It's the first time you've had such a flat platform. So the ability for free apps or apps that have an entry point so low to spread like wildfire, based on all the viral techniques that people have started to perfect, it's only going to accelerate. So for certain, there's going to be another Facebook killer or Instagram killer or Snapchat killer within the next 12 months. It's almost a certainty with the sort of conditions that are out there right now.
Yeah. Which I think is great for the ecosystem. I mean, it may be bad for Facebook, maybe not, they will just buy it, right? But I feel with this kind of exposure, I mean, for the first time ever, and correct me if I'm wrong on the carrier side, for the first time ever, I feel there's an opportunity where you could build a massive global business, no matter where, whether you are in Boston, whether you are in Hong Kong, or whether you are in San Francisco. And that's really empowering and enabling, and going back to Geoff's presentation, which is, at the end of the day, it's about people. And if you do something around people, whether that's the new innovations in, if you look at an iPhone, they have the motion sensor. And I'm in love with this app called Moves, which is really amazing. And look at the UI, and they track how much you've walked and so on. Probably no one has heard about it. But there are so many interesting concepts that relate to your daily life, that relate to who you engage with. At the end of the day, people to people, that's really, really incredible and powerful.
So just one quick comment. Just coming back to the ISIS comment, it makes me laugh because there's this thing called Square, and Square seems to have avoided all of the issues that ISIS has and actually focuses on an experience that's massively valuable. And then I was actually moderating a panel in a gaming conference down in LA, and they started discussing something called Candy Crush. Who knows what Candy Crush is here? Who plays Candy Crush?
Candy Crack.
Yeah, so I didn't, right? And I felt a bit embarrassed. And honestly, like the guy on the panel turned around to me and said, "Do not download it. Do not download it." And I downloaded it. And I understand now why he said, "Do not download it." It's military intelligence psychology applied to a game that's just another spin on a Bejeweled. Right? It's been around for 15 years. But my God, it is. Don't download it. You have to download it. Don't download it. Yeah, but the psychology of that experience is bigger than, that's my comment on Square versus ISIS.
Just to maybe change gears a little bit, I think, going a little bit on the two-platform comment and sort of how the world's moving, I feel like next year, on the enterprise side of apps, companies like Salesforce are kind of finally making the commitment, go native, stop with HTML5, and that world seems to be coalescing, and you're seeing a lot of people like Salesforce making those decisions and actually getting apps that people want to use into their hands, and I think we're just starting to see that now.
All right, so that dovetails right into my next question about new platforms. All right, who's heard of Tizen in this room? Who's heard of the Firefox OS? Who's heard of Jolla? Oh, okay, good. They suck anyway. Good. Canonical. Who's heard of Canonical? Ubuntu. Who's heard of Ubuntu? Well, they've mobilized that now. It's called Canonical. Wow, this is 1, 2.
I think Canonical is the name of the company.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's also the OS. They mobilized. Yeah. So now you can have an OS that powers servers now can fit on a phone. So these are all new. And so what do you guys think, how are these fully featured OSs going to change our industry? I mean, this is like, everyone is trying to crack the duopoly that we have today. And are these other platforms going to make a difference in the industry?
You left Microsoft off.
Oh, well,
They're just only trying.
They're not quite. I mean, also RIM was left out. BlackBerry. Sorry. But I mean, those are the old school platforms. But these are the new guys. I mean, these are the guys that are 12 months maybe. You heard these names. 12 months ago, 12 months class. So what do you guys think of, are they going to be disruptive? Let's put it that way.
So I'll just make a quick comment. There's about 6 billion people on the planet that have a phone already, right? They've already got a phone with an operating system. There's more phones in Africa than there are toilets. There's more phones in Africa than there are toothbrushes. That's kind of almost not interesting anymore. Now, there's going to be, depending on who you listen to, 50 billion devices connected in the next 5 to 10 years. There is no ecosystem. There's no, predominant distance there. So that's where the actual change of ecosystem becomes disruptive and interesting. And of course, then people are just a pretty stupid machine at that point as well.
Mario, I'd actually take exception with something you said, which is everybody's trying to disrupt the blue operator. Because, when you...
I think that everyone means operators.
I'm not even sure about that. I mean, so for instance, from a Swisscom perspective, we don't do Angry Bird, right? We let iOS handle all that. And we focus more on SMB on the enterprise side and a couple managed services that require a truck roll, right? But we let iOS, those guys handle the app stores by and large. The way I look at it is, when Mario asked me if I wanted to be on this panel, I said, well, I got something to say. I mean, so I've been doing this now for 12 years, and on the investment side, as an investor, I would say, mobile is dead. Long live mobile. Which means all the stuff that we've been looking at investing in over the last 12 years, meaning getting a solid OS, form factor that people can build to, an ecosystem, which is payments, advertising, app porting. I mean, it's unbelievable. 5 years ago, I had a startup, they paid $70,000 to do a port to Symbian, right? That would not happen anymore. All of that stuff has been erased. The networks, we've got good solid, we don't have the CDMA,
GSM battles.
GSM battle. We've got 3G, we've got LTE. LTE's got a lot of headroom. It's less than 200 million subscribers right now. So I look at the fact that we actually have a nice, stable ecosystem as, on the one hand, really boring from an investor looking for disruptive things. On the other hand, it creates tremendous opportunity. Because now what we can do is take this standard platform and apply it to specific verticals. And that's, for me, is at least the opportunity. We can take, boring businesses like
Salesforce.
Like the Salesforce.
Salesforce OS.
I was even thinking, we were talking about Greg Ovalle, I don't know if he's here, but he's looking at mobilizing the lottery, right? Get rid of those stupid scratch cards. I mean, it's those boring industries that need the application of mobile.
Interesting.
So you think about the evolution, or at least the mutation of the wireless networks. That what started a million years ago as, hey, if we have a problem, there's fragmentation out there, there's all these technologies that don't talk to one another. Boy, what a great thing this would be if we could come up with a single standard, and that was the original cellular, the analog. That then sort of diverged into, I sort of think of it as almost a Darwinian differentiation such that they were different species at one point. That is now coming full circle with the move back towards LTE. It's not to say they're identical networks, but they share more features than they do not share. The fragmentation is moving elsewhere now. It is moving with the multiple messaging apps. To your point about the folder that I need to have, well, let's see, this community of people use this. And I think that may be ultimately a problem. Fragmentation of the numerous apps, fragmentation of the operating systems, the difficulty of producing software across not just the platforms but the various flavors that are out there, I think adds complexity that had in many cases been simplified away. One more point. So the problem of unique addresses was solved with the telephone number. Now that's not very glamorous, but in fact any telephone number, you throw in the area code and country code, is a unique identifier. A lot of smart people a long time ago figured that out. And you're going to face those collisions again to the extent that there is regional and fragmented development on this thing. So I think that's going to be, with the operator community having sort of learned the lesson of, okay, this would go a lot better if we had a common one. We come back to that lesson every 30 years or so. And I think to watch the issue of fragmentation migrate into other areas is going to be an interesting trend.
So there's a common discussion I had with friends, and was Steve Jobs right? Was a closed, walled garden, closed ecosystem something unopen? Was he right? Or is openness still an opportunity for innovation and growth?
Wasn't he the one who said, I don't know why we would have an app store?
Yeah, I know, but then again, at least because Apple creates, it's a closed ecosystem, right? Not everything's open, not everything's available. Google's a little more open, but then again, at the end of the day, they are still controlled. And is openness is the future about openness? Is that how we're going to innovate?
I think we're talking about classic disruptive theory, right? Which is you see the vertical integration of a service, a managed service, right? And at some point, this getting back to the question about the OSs, you got this duopoly. The cool thing about HTML5 and some of the other guys out there is they're offering the next generation alternative to make sure that those guys keep their nose clean and don't get too picky. And if they do, then there'll be an opportunity, and you'll see a new horizontal layer replace the vertical experiences that exist right now.
Sure, because I had the same opinion when Android came out, and Symbian was, a lot like Symbian. A lot of bugs. I don't even think it had a mute button. There was a lot of issues around with Android, but it's evolved and come out today. But I'm curious to see that these new OSs, how they may disrupt the ecosystem and keep the noses clean of the duopoly. And that's kind of where I was kind of headed. Because also, 3 of these 4 are Linux-based. Yeah.
So just a quick comment. I feel this open versus closed discussion is a very valid discussion, so to say. Ask any normal user, a mom, 35, 40 years old. She doesn't give crap about open and closed. And I think, we sometimes get too encumbered into this. And I think, going back to Steve Jobs' comment, of course he's always right? Which is not true at all. The only thing constant, is change. So who knows what will happen. But if you really think of what iOS or iPhone in particular disrupted was something very transformative, right? The end user experience, the operating system was for the first time really, really usable on a phone, which was really not done before. And it really comes down to, I feel, someone really pioneering the next interaction medium other than touch. As long as there is touch, I fail to see how, other than Android and iOS is going, anyone else has a chance, unless they have more billions than Apple and more billions than Google to market them.
Microsoft.
Yeah, but they also need to get the software right and distribution right. I think it's very challenging in the existing paradigm. And end users are really, really difficult to convert if you don't have something transformative.
And I think Ash's comment made me think of 2 other things, actually. I agree. I don't think it's about open versus closed. I think it's about good enough and free is the big change.
So I think it's about distribution. And so the one, maybe we're lumping it into Android, but what Amazon is doing with Kindle, I think is going to have a very big impact on sort of where the market is heading. Amazon is dominant, is a very dominant player in a lot of the monetization models, and they're very big presence in consumer, and they are hell-bent on being an important player in this space. So I think it's a lot more about their distribution reach, less about the sort of OS choice they're making.
Yeah, and partly I think I agree, because like the Oklahoma Walmart shopper, right, is kind of like always my case study. And I look at, okay, do they definitely, if they get a device, they want to have Facebook on it. And if Facebook's not there, then what's this crap device all about, right? And I think that's where all these new platforms are having the challenge, right?
So I'm Canadian, maybe I've let that out already, but one of my good friends was the founder of Kobo Books, and I bet nobody here really interacts with the Kobo Reader. Anyone? Kobo Reader? So Kobo Reader, it's a competitor to the tablet. It's in the tablet space. They'll do $1 billion in revenue this year, selling tablets to every market other than the US. So it's a pretty interesting, it's a significant player in the space.
Got it.
Just a last comment on this open versus closed. By and large, I agree with you, Ash. It doesn't really matter, but if you're innovating on top of those platforms, you've got to have transparency and consistency. And I've had 2 portfolio companies who have gotten a punch below the belt from the big guys, and one was summoned to Cupertino, one was summoned to Mountain View, and they were told about policy changes that would have a big impact on their business. One was given a weekend to clean up their act, and there was nothing. They were abiding by the rules as they had been published. There was a change in the rules, and they had to go clean up their act overnight, or they were going to get kicked out of whatever they were doing. So I think that's where open versus closed and keeping the nose clean is really important, because if those guys are acting like aristocracies, then you've got a real issue, because they're going to change the rules to their benefit, and you're not going to see the level of innovation that you have.
You remember Brew? And so I published Rolling Stone. It was a hotel rocker, and what he used to do is go trash hotel rooms. That was the game. Yeah, it did get approved. Too violent. So yeah, so those are the things I'm worried about, right? So let's go into like directed questions. So for David, what's new in Washington with the FCC? I know there were changes recently. So can you give us an update?
So there's a new FCC commissioner. His name is Tom Wheeler, and he used to be the head of CTIA. We are watching his chairmanship with great interest. He has been aggressive in demonstrating that he is not the tool of the wireless industry, and it's been very helpful to consumer groups. And I'm picking my words carefully, as you can tell. I think he is going to be fun to watch. I can tell you that he is the hardest working man in show business. He is one of the smartest human beings that I can imagine for that position. But he has the mixed blessing for our industry. The mixed blessing is no chairman has had the background in the wireless industry that Tom Wheeler brings to that. No chairman has played inside ball from the carrier standpoint and gone into the commission. So that is going to make things colorful. Because if we rely on some of the same old stories, he's going to call nonsense on it, and that will be
Nonsense.
Yeah, well, we are who we are, right? We're taping this, right? I don't need this guy.
Now back to studio with Mario. So, question for Geoff. Geoff, what are you seeing happen today that the Foundry is doing that's inspiring you, and kind of what are the major challenges you're working on?
Yeah, I think, and this is a very public thing that AT&T has spoken about actually, is that it's common to all industry is what happens when the infrastructure is less valuable than the data that they actually have, and how can they actually use that data in a managed way to improve what they offer to the people that are their customers. And they publicly stated there's 3 levels to the use of the data, and they're very enthusiastic to do this. One level is just to make network performance better. Now, to do that, there's no need to ask anybody's permission. It's completely enclosed. It's the core product. The next one is to make their product offerings better. So AT&T's offerings to people such as Ubers, things like that. There's an opt-in level there. And then there is the next level, which is one that says, okay, I'm going to provide this information to third parties to make third parties' information, services better. Now, what's very interesting is there's a very visceral reaction to this from different people, and it tends to change depending on the age groups and the demographics.
Am I going to get more data in free minutes if I opt in?
So potentially, kind of. So what is interesting, one of the important things to understand, so one of the reasons the Foundry exists is that they don't believe that the money they make today will be there tomorrow. And it's clear that's true because the apps that we've spoken about are giving away their services for free. And understand those applications aren't competitors to the carriers. They have completely different business models. It's collateral damage. The operators are collateral damage because those companies couldn't exist without what the operators provide. So almost the WhatsApp turn around and say, I'm sorry I've taken 13 billion away from you, it's not my fault.
Do you think they should be regulated? Do you think that the laws that apply to AT&T, T-Mobile should apply to Facebook, WhatsApp, because essentially they are they're providing communication services, right? And I think if I read the law, it definitely does look to me that it applies to them.
So we've had some this is kind of like bike riding with people, conversations about regulation and common carriage laws. And there are clearly things that are beneficial to society to have regulated. You don't want services where you can choose who gets the services if those services are, important to society as a leveler.
But by the way, this is not an area which is not being watched by the FCC. I mean, there are your cell phone number not getting calls on your cell phone from telemarketers and stuff. There is a large body of stuff that is being very careful of that stuff, privacy protection, all that sort of thing. So I think it's maybe not at the level you're suggesting, but there's certainly some boundaries on it that are being watched.
From the regulated carrier perspective, the desire would be to achieve a level playing field, not by burdening these companies with regulation, but by relieving the regulated carriers. And so that will be, I think, the tension of this commission will be that there's going to be a new paradigm, if you will, that as the way in which these telecommunications shift utterly to IP-based, what is the regulatory role? Tom Wheeler is on record as saying that it is not a zone of zero regulation. There must be regulation to ensure that certain societal goals are met. But that said, I think the desire on the part of the existing carrier community would be to deregulate rather than to see that regulation burden placed on these that are emerging.
And not just so we have FCC commissioners visit the Foundry, and we have a working prototype of or demonstration of WebRTC where people are making phone calls of the existing mobile network. It terminates into an iPad, it terminates on a PC, you pass it from the iPad to the PC, to the laptop, and then the question at the end of it, what have you just seen? What is that? From a regulatory point of view. And the whole purpose is, it comes back to that earlier discussion that says the regulation doesn't keep up with the technology. And obviously, I completely agree, there should be a level playing field, to going forward.
You mentioned WebRTC. So how many people know what WebRTC is here today? Awesome. When are we going to start to see services roll out, at least premium services on WebRTC? Because who would love to get a phone call in their car, but not on their phone, or on their laptop, or maybe not over traditional circuit switch stuff, right? I mean, and that's pretty much what WebRTC. Maybe you can explain a little bit about what it.
Yeah, we have that currently working in the labs today and prototypes. I mean, one of the big shifts, I mean, the web is meeting communications. And there's one fact for that, is that already in the world there were 1 billion WebRTC enabled endpoints out there in the market today. So next year, what we're going to start to see is that whole thing that says it's good enough. So for the things that are good enough, communication will start to move over to it. And actually that's the segmentation of what really needs to work is make the world good enough. So 2014 is going to be interesting because we're going to see communications start to disappear into applications for the first time, web pages.
Rob Coneybeer. All right, let's get this side. We've been very quiet over here. All right, so what did you see on the, because so a year ago we talked about you came out of the closet and said, I'm into hardware and I just, if you're at hardware, I want to invest, let me contact me, right? And so now it's been a year. So what, you must have seen a lot, the good, the bad, the ugly, and talk about, what is the big opportunity for budding connected entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so around hardware about a year ago, we talked about how we're very actively looking at the space at Shasta. I'm a mechanical engineer, so mechanical engineers have suffered in Silicon Valley for about 15 to 20 years. I used to build satellites before I came out here, and over the last year, since this time last year, I've made a seed investment in satellite companies, an investment in a drone company called Airware, an investment in a gaming platform company called Ouya, and also made an investment in a company called Plethora. And you were asking about 3D printing, and basically what they're doing is they're saying, well, there's still this huge thing out here. 3D printing is about additive manufacturing. You add up the layers, but it turns out that there's this other thing called subtractive manufacturing, or milling machines. It really hasn't seen a lot of innovation as well, so we've invested in that space. So as far as like, what have I seen, what have I been doing over the last year, it's been very active in that space. So I think going forward, the area that is going to be very interesting, and it's going to be incredibly related to mobile, is the whole arena of robotics. And I think robotics, people have traditionally thought of it as like the Isaac Asimov android running around, or the Terminator robot, that likes to blow people up and take over the world. It's like that, or it's somebody that comes and brings you a beer, right?
So are you going to invest in cybernetics, startup that we?
It's interesting because what's happening is, I think that the conventional idea of a humanoid robot is the idea of an autonomous object. So, but what's happened is you can have a robot be just about anything that senses, learns, and makes autonomous actions on the world around it. So obviously, what people would think of historically as like a humanoid robot would fit that way. But a thermostat can be the same thing. It senses its environment. It knows what's going on with the weather. It knows the inputs you put in. It learns from that. And over time, the routines get better and better. And then it takes action. It actually adjusts the temperature. It actually adjusts what's going on around you. And I think more and more and more objects in our daily lives are going to act autonomously. They're going to act almost like robots. And I think of it not as consciousness, but increased competence. They become very, very competent objects, and the more you use them, the better they get. So I think that's a trend that'll be coming to kind of this hardware world around us. It's really these thoughts of robotics, but applied to anything physical that you see around you.
Cool.
Yeah, go ahead. I got one example, you probably know it, which is Blue River Technologies, this is a great example of everything that Silicon Valley does well applied to agriculture. So these guys have a robot that basically goes down a row of lettuce in a farm, and it basically does optical recognition, and it'll determine what's ahead of lettuce or what's a weed. Where it sees a weed, it'll zap it with a little bit of herbicide. So now you don't need somebody out in the field doing that really hard work. And that's the kind of thing, not Isaac Asimov type, practical application of robotics.
We kill it.
Yeah, we kill it. Yeah. It's not sexy, but it's a huge market.
I love it. And being a farm boy from Central Valley, definitely don't want to be weeding. It's tough. It's hot in Fresno. All right, so Ash, what are the new trends in app acquisition you're seeing? Okay, what are the? So who's an app publisher here? Okay, who wants? Obviously, you want acquisition. So what are some interesting practices you've seen? And you wrote an awesome white paper recently, right?
Yes.
So kind of explain what your findings were in that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the plug. I'm still waiting for, maybe someday a smartphone will launch a space shuttle to Mars. Don't try it at home though. I think more seriously though, I think app marketing is increasingly, how should I say, it's one of the most overlooked things when you're building a cool, nice app or a mobile website for that matter. You don't think of these things. You're like, this is my greatest idea, and you toil away for a few months, and maybe Rob will fund you if you have a hardware angle to it. But really, the biggest challenge is once you launch into the App Store or Google Play or anywhere, is how do you get it in front of the users? And that really is becoming increasingly more and more difficult. How many apps are there in the App Store? Maybe over 1 million now. So the key things that we found over time is really focus a lot on, of course, making your app really nice. Design matters. Make sure that it doesn't crash more than once a day. Just making sure that you have a good quality product. After that, of course, you really want to, there is a lot you can do with free marketing, especially in the world that we're living. There is, Facebook, there is Twitter, there is so much out there. Now there's Pinterest if you are into commerce applications. You could leverage email. Some of the stats that we see is mind-boggling. For some customers, 80% of the emails are now being opened on mobile devices, which is incredible. So make sure that your email links really work on mobile. And a lot of the free marketing, of course, it's free, so you don't have to pay. You don't have to have a big budget around marketing. And really build a lot of users and audience base, going forward from that free marketing to, later on if you want to do paid acquisition. There's a lot of options out there. There is, we work with about 300, 400 different ad networks. Facebook works great. Twitter is rumored to bring out, app install ads. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. You really have to be a lot more planned and methodical and measure everything that you're doing, because ultimately the biggest challenge for any service, unless you're Snapchat, is to get in front of the users and get adoption.
Thanks, Ash. Lars, so you focus on the enterprise side. And so, what's interesting or taking off, and what's interesting to you right now?
So I guess to say we're enterprise, we're also doing infrastructure. So Keep, one of my investments, they're an ad monetization infrastructure component. So we're certainly seeing a lot in that, and we're seeing a lot in this transition of people trying to figure out distribution and app install as it's probably the closest thing you have to a sort of bubble economy where it's the dollars going in or dollars coming from app developers themselves going into other app infrastructure companies, and it's almost a closed circle. There's not a lot of brands or advertising putting dollars into that right now. So it's a very sort of kind of runaway market with interesting dynamics. The places where I would say there has been a lack of activity might be a lot of people, and this maybe goes to the mobile is boring side, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years of sort of mobile infrastructures, mobile backends. And by and large, that space has not matured the way people had thought it was going to. And so it's interesting to see if maybe that changes over the next couple of years.
SDNs?
Oh, I wasn't going to go that far. I wasn't going to go into the data center side, but frameworks for enterprises to make mobile apps, support mobile apps, and things like that. People are using most of the web technologies right now to do that. People can go perfectly well to AWS and kind of spool up what they need for mobile. Specialized mobile backends so far have not been a place that's taken off.
Rob Trice. So, been in this space for a while. So, what new ventures, at least in the telco space, that are focusing on core network stuff? And kind of I want to see your point of view on, why are we seeing more startups focused in that area, the core, and they're kind of going into the, to be blunt, kind of useless apps and ventures with no real value?
I would disagree with that. I mean, I think that there are, and Lars knows about this. I mean, Swisscom, we're doing a next generation cloud project, which is pretty cutting edge. And there's a
I didn't know we were allowed to talk about it.
I don't think we're allowed to say much more than that. We're doing some really cool stuff. We're looking to really differentiate based on the network, both defensively and offensively. And so there's a lot of innovation that's occurring. I don't think it gets the TechCrunch hype, other than people just running around SDN and NFV, whatever that means. And I think there's a lot of confusion about SDN. I will say this though, I think that whole SDN space where you're kind of pitting the traditional telco infrastructure guys against the IT infrastructure guys versus the security guys, that is like the big battle over the next 5 to 10 years for the core. And you're seeing everybody kind of get their guns in place right now. And the carriers obviously play a big role in that. So I think that's one of those where there's a lot of moving pieces right now, and everyone's kind of trying to figure out how to play this thing. There's a lot of people out hyping SDN a little bit too early, but there's cool stuff going on in the core. But I don't think we're really going to see the results of that for another, say, 3 to 5-ish years.
Geoff, you want to rebuttal on this?
Well, I agree. It's kind of nice Era got a nice exit, I have to say. That billion up front was kind of like...
That was the enterprise Instagram.
Yeah, that was interesting. We were actually, we have some experience with some of that technology. But completely agree. And actually, it's the joining of all those industries into a future. If you look at the network today, it is so stupid. It is unbelievable. So everyone's developing applications for mobile, but we're putting them all in a core. And then it's like having the house at the end of a motorway that's 50 miles away, and we run all the way down, we run all the way back up. Because 90% of the coverage is actually in mobile networks, but none of that is leveraged in terms of utilization, latency, yield, or anything. So everyone's aware of that. Then you get into the politics of position, the politics of protection, the beauty of religion, the purists, the Stanford guys, the kind of, all of that's going to be an incredible journey to follow for the next 5 years. And I'd love to time travel and see which companies are here in 5 years' time in these spaces, actually.
Cool. So let's start with Rob Coneybeer, and this is like your 2014 predictions. So go to your crystal ball, and what 1 or 2 events are you going to see that actually will make an impact?
Well, I think I mentioned one of them before, so then I can give you 2, right? Which is, we're going to see at least a few crazy, big mobile apps come along that nobody has anticipated now, whether it's like the next QuizUp or the next Snapchat, etc. I think the other thing that'll happen is, I hate to say it, but I think there's going to be some sort of large security breach that's going to hit, that's really going to concern people, and it's either going to be payment related or it's going to be device related, where people actually find a way to hack in and it creates havoc out there. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be a black swan-like event. So if you're looking for something more speculative, that's what I would say is a black swan event around the idea of security breach in and around this whole smartphone ecosystem.
I don't have much. I already told you. I think this is the put up or shut up year for NFC. And then the other thing I would agree. I think that dog. If that dog doesn't come this year, I think. Yeah, I hear it. I don't remember who was talking about the bubble in the app. The bubble in the whole app economy. Lars, I couldn't agree more. I think that there's got to be a reset a little bit in terms of, I would say both on the app side and also on the mobile advertising. I just think that there's just a little bit there's a little bit too much elevation and it's not grounded. And that at some point, probably into 2014, needs to come back down to ground.
David?
And which would, I think, be interesting on that. On the one hand, if you're the storefronts, you're getting the kind of fat margins that used to be the province of the walled garden and the carrier community. that came under attack because, not that anyone was mad, but it was just irresistibly fat margins. But with what you're saying, if you think there's a bubble going on, then maybe that explains some reluctance to attack that, thinking that that ice cube is going to start melting kind of rapidly anyway. You know, we were talking earlier, because that's what panelists do, you've all been online. And I think one of the, just something of interest that doesn't quite get to the software-defined network, but speaks to the viability of alternative networks are some of the services that are coming out. I'm speaking here of Republic Wireless, Scratch Wireless is another one, Freedom Pop, everybody heard of these? Any of them? It's a standard-looking mobile device, smartphone. Actually, the Republic just got the Moto X, so it's not the the cut bin kind. These are good. They seek to run your data traffic and VoIP over a Wi-Fi network whenever that is available, and will revert to a MVNO relationship with one of the, if you will, traditional carriers, if that isn't. And I think that's provocative, and I'm interested to watch how that evolves. So.
Can I just backtrack once? I'll shut up. But there was somebody I was talking to who was saying, you know, Silicon Valley right now is 20-somethings, solving problems for 20-somethings. And how can I get an Uber to deliver my vegan meal to my door or to my kid? and this is one thing just in the wireless space that I think we tend to forget is that this is a much bigger play than Silicon Valley, that there's a whole southern hemisphere that has an entirely different ecosystem on wireless. And even in the United States, it's called TracFone Wireless. It's the 5th largest carrier in the United States. So there's all these alternative carriers that we don't, because we're living here, they are playing in Peoria, and they're playing well there. And just keep an eye on the fact that it's not just about what we see here. There's a bigger, broader world out there.
So I agree with Rob on NFC, but I don't agree with him on the bubbles. I would like to think that's overexcitement. And it's really, I mean, every industry in its, early years kind of goes through these cycles. And I think, which is great, and it has good and bad. I think the industry is definitely maturing, at least in the ecosystem that TapSense is. And it's seeing like real revenue from, of the orders of hundreds of millions of dollars to some companies even doing a bit on the higher end. And especially on advertising end, you look at Pandora, you look at Facebook's, for sure there are like ad installers, but there are also different brands and agencies. I tend to think that brands and advertising follow wherever the end users are going. And all signs point to mobile. And of course, what mobile is going to look like will change and evolve over time. But the user adoption is just massive. And it's cutting into a lot of existing businesses. It's cutting into a lot of online businesses. And a massive shift is happening. Facebook's business, for example, 2-3 years ago in mobile was nothing. And actually when they went IPO, their stock tanked, primarily because of their lack of mobile offerings. Once they solve that, look at the end result now. So I see definitely there is some bubble, there is overexcitement, but some of these things are very, very real. And it's driven by the end user adoption. And in terms of trends that I see, a lot more tools and technology as mobile matures will mature as well. So one thing, people always talk about is real-time bidding. That has been a big deal online. It's moving in a big way to mobile. Of course, it means completely different things because all the tools and technology and the stack is very, very different. We predicted in our 2014 ebook that about 50% of advertising will happen through real-time bidding in mobile next year, which is pretty phenomenal considering it wasn't even around a year and a half ago. I'm really excited about how mobile merges with physical world. So the things around iBeacon Apple has done is really incredibly, we may not realize the full potential right now, but it's amazing that they launched something 2-3 months ago, and I just heard that a couple days ago, they rolled it out in all of their 254 retail physical stores at the same time. And just think about these tools and technology that's really taking over our lives, hopefully in a positive way, and making a difference. And I see, kind of rock on to the ecosystem. Of course, there might be some bubbles, there might be some casualties along the way, but I think it moves the whole ecosystem forward. So I'm very optimistic, as you can tell.
Thanks, Ash. Lars?
Maybe one statement I will make is, maybe, and this would even sound like I'm short mobile and long desktop, but that's not quite what it is. I think there would be a fantastic blurring of what mobile is. So I still struggle with what tablets are. Are they a mobile device? Are they, and what Microsoft's putting into the market now? And so is the definition of mobile that it's connected to a carrier? Is it that it doesn't have a keyboard? Is it screen size? It's become this, I think that definition is going to be harder and harder to make going forward, and you're going to see people having to develop and think differently about how that whole ecosystem works. And the one that probably you and I have talked about 10 times, and I would be here to tell you that HTML5 is going to win. I actually think this, this is the year that it yet again doesn't win. So.
I have to wait another year. So I had all these shirts printed out, 2014, the year of HTML5.
Everyone needs rags.
I'm just gonna line now and just fill in the number. Geoff, yeah, what do you think for 2014?
So we haven't discussed this at all, so this will be a random thought. This might be a wish rather than a prediction. But cable TV subscriptions, I haven't met anybody that enjoys paying for cable TV subscriptions. And I heard that, I read it somewhere. It was an observation that they said that TV was making the same mistake as the recording industry, that actually user behavior had moved, but there wasn't an easy alternative yet. But when that easy alternative arrives, it's like falling off a cliff. And then to go further down, whenever I speak, the only reason that people keep it is because of sports packages, live sports packages. So once that starts to move, it all goes. So in 2014...
So you think it goes all on demand?
I think it goes all unbundled and all very a la carte and on demand.
The speed that they provide on the cable, AT&T cannot get, maximum AT&T gives you about 3 megabits. They can provide you 40 feet.
But satellite still gives you the most efficient distribution network possible.
That's true, but that's technology versus a consumer. Consumer doesn't understand that.
Okay, hold on, question, guys. Okay, let's go.
No, I think that's waiting because people don't want to pay it. There's alternative ways to deliver, and no one's made an easy package, easy consumable way to do that. But when it happens, it'll be like dropping off a cliff, and it will happen. I think 2014 might be.
Cool. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an awesome panel. Thank you guys for having us. I would go to Q&A, but I think we've really run over our time. But I think the panelists will be here to answer questions off.